You're listening to Intuitive Style, where we believe that everyone has style. I'm Maureen Welton. In conversation with fantastic guests, we explore how to tap into our style intuition so that we can dress authentically and live fully. Today's guest is Ofelia, writer of All the Above on Substack. She has a discerning eye for fashion, film photography, and vibes. You've probably come across her What's Everyone Wearing in Paris series, or my personal favorite series, Outfits Inspired by Film, featuring her original images. Best of all, she's a self-proclaimed outfit repeater and looks great while doing it. Ofelia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
One of the key themes of All the Above is about your experience living in Paris, being from the US originally, and so I would just love to hear how your style has changed between living in the US and in Paris. How has the change of scenery impacted your style?
Yeah, definitely. It's changed quite a bit, I would say. For some additional context, I moved from Austin, Texas, which there's maybe like two seasons, or there's like one giant season and like a couple months of a mild winter. And I didn't really have to account for a lot of fluctuation. I actually had to account for a lot of heat in living in Austin. And so moving to Paris, I have to now account for actually living in four different seasons. And even within this season, there is a lot of fluctuation. So I've had to get really good at layering. And I also have to account for how hot I'm going to get while I'm walking places, which is something that I hadn't really had to think about before because I was in a car and my body was not moving as much. So I kind of start by opening the window every day and sticking my hand out to get a feel for the baseline and then either add or take off layers based off of that. So in terms of how much I'm wearing, it's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, I would think that the key change would be like, I dress more fabulously now. And, I think you would probably say that that's the case. But, so much of what I just heard in that answer is like, actually, very practical things have changed because, you're more exposed to the elements, you're walking more. And like, I think it's really interesting to talk about car culture and how that affects what we're wearing versus public transport culture. Like for me, I live in a car place right now in the Bay Area. And so that means that like I even just for example, I just went to Seattle, and when I was in Seattle, I was like wearing Birkenstocks everywhere because I was like walking, and like the whole point is to walk. And then being in the Bay Area, like depending on what you're doing, if you're just like driving up to a restaurant, it's really different. How would you say like how do you find ways to be creative with that practical requirement versus just defaulting to like what's most convenient, or is there a tension there at all?
I think it really depends on the outdoor element. Actually, one of my places of struggle is the rain. I don't have a solid rain shoe. And it's actually really interesting. We moved in December of last year. I didn't know it was really rainy in January or in the winter in general. But all of January it rained a lot. And there was a lot of things at play. I only had a certain number of shoes to wear, but I had the shoes I had to wear were suede tennis shoes, which didn't quite work so well for the rain. So now, as we're approaching that season again, I'm starting to think about, okay, well, I really need to get a rain shoe figured out because I could theoretically wear tennis shoes, but my feet are going to get soaked. Like, I still remember the feeling of my toes being soaking wet when we're outside. Um, so I feel like there is tension, but more so in like utility, but also in like, how is this going to be like cute and
Yeah.
that I'm going to actually want to wear it. Um, I think I think it's really interesting though, because when we think about comfort, I think comfort changes from person to person, but I think it also changes within the person from place to place. Like pre-pandemic, I would be wearing leggings, a sweater, tennis shoes. Like that to me sounds comfortable. But in Paris, that is frowned upon. And I don't really wear leggings as outside of working out anymore. But when I think of comfort, I think, oh, okay, I'm going to dress down, but I'm still wearing jeans. Depending on the season, I'm wearing a flowy blouse, or, today I'm wearing a sweater. I have a t-shirt layered, and maybe my shoes. Actually, this morning I was wearing loafers and I had to run an errand and I put on tennis shoes. But like the tension is still there, but there's certain blocks of my day where I appease one side of my brain, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And then sometimes I'm like, you know what, my toes need a break, so I'm gonna put on a tennis shoe so that maybe tomorrow I can wear those really nice flats, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and maybe this will be encouragement that I'd love if you'd write a post about what are Parisians wearing in the rain. The Bay Area is surprisingly rainy. There's two seasons, the wet season and the dry season. And so when it rains here, it's like pouring like crazy.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to figure out what my rain situation is going to be. So very selfishly, I would love a post on that.
On it. I think I have more mental capacity this year to do it versus last year.
I have a bit of an ephemeral question, but I'm hoping you'll go there with me. I'd love to talk about the intersection between your film photography and your interest in personal style. How do those two relate to you, and how do they differ?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting question, and I think they both exist on a spectrum, and I would say actually they're quite similar in a few senses. Is film photography, and there's like so many ranges within film photography, right? I'm not sure how familiar you are with film cameras, for example, but you can buy a point and shoot, you can buy a disposable, and then you can get really, really technical and buy manual cameras where you are adjusting every tiny thing. And I think when we also think about style is we can hop on the trends and be like, I like that, I like that, I like that, and that's totally valid and fine. Or we can really discern like what do we like? What makes us feel interested or alive, or what gives us that like fun feeling inside? And I think for me, especially film photography does that for me. And so it's interesting when I compare both mediums, to me they're on the same spectrum, but one is slightly, well, it depends. One is very expensive and technical, and one can be more loosey and flowy and forgiving. Um, and yeah,
I
so
genuinely have no idea which is which. Which one is more technical for you?
for me, film photography is more
Okay, okay,
technical. In terms of style, I think so. I guess let me backtrack a little bit. I didn't really start thinking about like how I was getting dressed until the post-pandemic, which is actually really interesting because I also feel like that's when I really started to get into film photography, actually around the same time. And I think we all have these a long time ago, and I need to go back and review that article. I wrote about like the five hierarchies of fashion, which at the very base level, you need to something to wear. And once you've satisfied that need, then maybe you can start considering, well, do I like what I'm wearing? And then once you've identified that, then you can start asking yourself, okay, well, what fabrics am I buying? Do I like how those fit on my body or the longevity of them? And then maybe once you figure that out, then you can start asking, okay, well, what about sustainability practices? And so I think like to me, it's like I've reached a certain level of technicality within fashion, but in comparison to other people, I'm not insanely technical about proportions yet, for example, or like a specific sleeve. Like I'm still learning that.
yeah.
So to me, in a technical sense, like film photography to me is much more technical because I've deep dived into that world much more rapidly. But the technicality of fashion also very much exists, right? It just depends on what people's interests are at that given moment in time. And I think they shift. They can shift
Hmm.
drastically throughout the years.
I'd love your perspective on that ramp up between the two, right? From my perspective, clothing technicality is extremely high resource and high effort to get up those ranks as you are the hierarchy. How do you feel that the two compare? Like with film, does one have a higher barrier to entry than the other, or would you say that it really just depends on your level of interest?
I think it depends on your level of interest. I think you could very easily start flirting with the idea of film photography by picking up a point and shoot. So it's a little bit more than a disposable camera, but maybe it has a zoom lens, or maybe it lets you turn on flash or turn off flash, you know? So it kind of gets you a little bit in that space of thinking about, okay, I want a slightly better photo than a disposable camera, but I'm not quite there yet in terms of going full manual, right? But also, in the same sense, like, I think fashion is also similar, right? We can think like, okay, I want a white t-shirt. And I feel like this is a grand big debate of like, what's the best white t-shirt out there?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. It's just, what are you looking for? How do you want it to lay on your body? Do you want a baby tee? Do you want pointel? Like, do you want even a white t-shirt, you know? And so I think it's like the curiosity around what you're trying to get to is really what like helps push you and propel you into that direction.
Mm, I love that. And such a good analogy, too. Separately, I've been thinking about this same concept. I did not realize you had an amazing post on this. I'm going to go read it right after and I'll link it in the show notes. I have been thinking about that as well as like this idea of like, I feel like personally I'm phasing up into a higher level and of personal style where I was getting dressed and I was putting clothes on my body and it was very like kind of survival mode with some moments of joy and self-actualization. But I feel like I'm moving into a place of like, ooh, I really do like this and I don't connect with this in a very like exciting way. You kind of alluded to where you feel that you are. Are you trying to like go further up the ranks, or like do you feel that you're in a place of stasis, or how do you think about it for yourself?
I no, I don't think personal style is an ever-ending thing, to be honest. Like I don't think that I think we all reach like certain plateaus where maybe we stay for a bit. Like we're okay with where we are, and then some event or something propels us forward, you know? And I think when we allow ourselves to have perspective, that's when those big jumps happen. And what I mean by that is that like you get up and you get dressed every day, right? And then eventually you're like, okay, I have a solid outfit that I really love. Like for example, I love button downs. I feel like I have a variation of ways and styles that I can wear them. But then there reaches a point where, okay, I've worn a lot of button downs lately. I need something else. Like, how am I going to change this? And it doesn't always have to be like this insane like shift or jump. Like, you know, brooches, for example, are were huge this year and still are and probably will continue to be. Like, but I saw a lot of people include brooches on, you know, the button area or the sleeves. Or yesterday I saw actually, I believe her name is Michelle Lynn. I actually follow her, but I don't remember if I'm getting the last name correctly. But she had added a brooch to the back of her button down. And so I just created this silhouette and I was like, whoa, like I had never thought of that. But I was like, I kind of want to try that, you know? And so I think that that I'm currently in between stages if I'm being very honest. Like yes, I'm very happy with where I'm at, but it's hard not to want to be here, but be here, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Like sometimes I'm like, well, can I just get here? Is that like,
Mm-hmm.
can someone just pull me up and then I'm here? But I know that's not how it works. um, but I think the other hard part for me is that I am a very slow shopper. Like my wish list is endless, but if you put money in front of me and we're like, make a decision, unless I've been contemplating that decision for a while, I don't know if I could make one. And I think it is a blessing and a curse in many ways. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, I'm happy where I am, but I'm like currently thinking of, okay, what are things that are going to propel me more in the direction I want to go to?
Yeah. And the brooch being an example. Are there any other examples or things that have caught your eye that you're thinking about trying, or is it more
Yes.
about styling? Is it about garments?
I mean, there's a lot of garments I would love to try. And to be honest, I wish there was, I know like in the US, you have Rent the Runway or other types of platforms very similar to that. And I found some platforms here, but they're mostly geared towards like day dressing events. Like I need a dress for a wedding. So I've yet to find that, but I would love to be able to, like, I'm fascinated by suede. I would love to try, well, one, I would love to own a suede jacket one day, but I feel like suede is so personal, you know, like you have to kind of try a lot to find the perfect fit. And I love it on everyone else, but I have yet to one find something that makes me want to like splurge for that money because suede is not cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think one thing that I'm fascinated by, and I actually did try, I just didn't buy at that time, mules. Paloma Wool, they're a Spanish brand, they had a pop-up in Paris during the summer or early summer, and I actually went in because I just happened to peruse. I love perusing. And this pair of sandals caught my eye, and I went back before it closed, and they happened to have the mules, and I was like, you know what, I'll just try them on. And they were these beautiful mules, but they had like calf hair on them. And it's not something that I would ever consider on a website. But the fact that I tried it on and I was like, wait a second, this is actually really cool. So since then, I've been like fascinated with this idea of a mule, but like also the idea of a mule in like a very cool statement piece, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm also thinking about like how to, well, I came from the other direction of I love calf hair and I've always loved calf hair and I'm like, oh,
Mm,
how can I inject that into my style? And I'm trying to figure out like what garment to apply that on. But I think that's really interesting. Like there's so many different ways to conceptualize like our wish list, where for me it's like I usually have like a very specific concept in mind and I'm trying to like find the right puzzle piece, and maybe you feel that way too. Or even the suede jacket, it sounds like, or suede in general is kind of like your equivalent of that. And then there's also like those just like diamonds that we that like, really get the sparkle in our eye. There's kind of like a mix between those two that kind of drive our taste and our excitement. Super interesting. I'm excited to see like what happens for you with those. I also, on that vein of, I would consider you a tastemaker, right? So you have like the most beautiful flat lays, your series about what people are wearing. And, even just hearing like your take on being a very slow shopper yourself, I can just speak from my perspective. Sometimes I feel like I need to personally embody the taste that I have in order to feel that I am a tastemaker. How do you feel about that, the idea of embodying a taste versus having a taste and presenting it in a visual way? Is there tension for you between the two, or do you view them as separate?
I think, I think there is a little bit of tension because I don't consider myself a tastemaker. So you
Oh,
calling me a so
that's
you
so
calling me,
surprising.
so you calling me a tastemaker, I'm like, I'm insanely flattered, to be honest. I think, yeah, so there is a little bit of tension. And I think it's because, and I don't know if maybe my idea of what a tastemaker is the incorrect
Hmm.
definition, maybe. But to me, I guess maybe a tastemaker is potentially ahead of the curve. They're
Mm.
the ones maybe not necessarily dictating, but they're like, they were interested in, I mean, what's popular? Fringe before fringe came
Yeah.
around. Obviously, fashion is cyclical, right? But you know, they're the early adopters maybe when we talk about
Mm,
technology, like they're the early
mhm.
adopters. And I feel like I am a slow adopter in that sense, just from my consumption point of view. Um, but so yeah, I think there is a bit of tension. But when I think of like embodiment, I think the people who are um, the most authentic to themselves are people who are wearing their clothes and not letting their clothes wear them, if that makes sense. Or it is the individual, it's like where they just step into this outfit and it feels so much like them, regardless of where it falls within the trend cycle. And I think, it's actually really interesting because I lean very minimal, but I am absolutely enamored and fascinated by women who wear bold prints, like especially women who mix prints a lot, because my brain does not function like that, you know? So to me, I'm like, they are the tastemakers. They are the really cool people. And so it's like maybe to me, tastemaker is someone who is the opposite of what I am, right? Um, and yeah, I think I need to sit with that one more.
Well, I heard this quote a while ago that was, when you're an artist, you're refining your art to a degree where you hope that it looks like someone else made it. In this way of like trying to, like, it's not going to be good enough until it doesn't look like it was mine. And I wonder if there's a little bit of that tension here where, like, certainly I I don't view myself as a tastemaker, but I like put that out into the ether as something I wanted. And then someone
Yeah,
was like, I think of you as one. And I was like, what? And
yeah,
even just in our conversation, like the same kind of idea where I'm like, to me, you're a tastemaker not because you're cutting edge, but because you're extremely discerning and you have a very clear point of view of what you think is stylish and what is taste for you. And to me, that's taste making because of the restraint. So, I mean, again, I'm not like saying that your definition is right or mine is right or wrong,
no, I
just
like
that they're
that.
different.
I actually like the quote you brought up, and I think it healed many parts in me that were potentially broken. But I I think very much an extent, yes, I very much agree with that quote, especially from like my photography point of view. Like, I am so hypercritical of what I put out there. And it is sometimes a struggle to put out my work or even to write articles about style where I am featured, like what I wore in Paris, because I often think, like, well, what if it is boring? What if no one likes it? And I think I often have to push myself to go back to, well, why did I start writing? Why did I start photography? Why did I start sharing? Is because I wanted to do that. I wanted to put my voice out there. And if I like it, if I felt good wearing that outfit, who cares what Sally Sue and Betty and whoever else down the street thinks, you know? Yeah, I think the theme of this entire conversation is going to be tension,
Yeah.
because it is actually, it kind of makes me think of something. Whenever I'm walking down the street with my husband, like my brain just kind of turns off. Like my husband is like, the gif of like the little penguin like walking down the street? Like that's me with my husband. Like my brain turns off. I'm like, I'm just following you. We're going
Mm.
wherever we're going, right? And so my husband's like, "Do you notice all the people that stare at you when we're walking down the street?" And I'm like, "No, like I don't." And he's like, "Yeah." And it's like, and my husband's not a jealous type, but he's like, "It's men and women." And I'm like, "Oh, I've never really noticed." And he's like, "Yeah, a lot of people like turn and look at you." And it's really interesting because I'm like, "Well, why are they doing that?" Like, do I have like, like that is my first response. Or it's like, and then I go like, "Oh, is there something on my outfit? Like, do I have toilet paper on my shoe?" Like, it's like, it's so interesting how your brain just kind of wants to be like, bring you down several notches while the rest of the world sees you in a much different light. And so I think that kind of reminds me of that quote where it's like, we want to be perceived so differently from our own point of view. But then when other people recognize us for who
Mhm.
we are, it's like, wait a second, what's going
Mhm.
on here?
Mhm. I think this, to me, this is a healing conversation too, right? Because for so much of my life, I have taken in fashion content by other people. And I think, yes, you can write about insecurity and you can express, like, oh, I felt uncertain. But I think having a larger discussion about, is this good enough? Am I good enough? Is the outfit good enough? I mean, you didn't say those exact words, so I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. But I think that's like the core of the discussion is like this feeling of good enoughness, like what is
Yeah.
enough. And I think when you are, or when I was, and still sometimes am, a passive consumer of other people's fashion content or personal style content, it can be really hard not to assume that it's always like sunshine and rainbows and like this pot of confidence that's just like bubbling up. And maybe that's not actually the case for everyone. Maybe certain people do have that. But no, I really appreciate you sharing that. It's not always super easy.
It's not. And I'm sure everyone, even the people who we think have it
Yeah.
all together, have scenarios like this or have days, at a minimum, but definitely they've experienced that before.
Well, and just to reiterate, I've gotten that perspective from you. And I mean that in like in a very genuine, like I'm inspired by you way. And so it is very easy to put on those rose-colored glasses and say, "Oh, it must be easy for her." And to that point, I'm sure I am thinking of other creators too, but even within this conversation, I'd love to talk a little bit more about your personal style and how you choose what to buy and wear. I know we talked about being a slow adopter. I'm also a slow adopter, so I relate. But how do you decide what to buy and what not to buy? Or it sounds like mostly what not to buy.
What to buy? Um, so I keep actually something that I started a long time ago is I keep two types of wish lists. I keep because I'm a very practical shopper, I will say. Um, there is like, I need this versus like, oh, that was kind of cool. That was intriguing to me. So I'm going to put it in a different list. And then I love to peruse and to look at websites and even walk into stores, touch things and feel things and really like immerse myself in the experience. And based off of that, things shift and maybe they come on and like it's like this teeter-totter situation. And then I think also when I experience a great amount of tension is when purchases happen for me. So I assure you, probably in the next few months, I will have some sort of rain shoe on my feet. And at this point, for example, I haven't tried them on yet, but I am considering Solomon's because they have a waterproof version. I have to actually do a little bit more research on that. And it is something that I've resisted for a long time. But I was like, okay, if this is what's going to get me to maybe the step of potentially a different type of rain shoe, then that's the direction I need to go. But in terms of what I typically buy, those have been scenarios where I'm like, oh, I really need a trench coat. I really need a trench coat. So, like, that was one of my purchases last fall. And I have worn that trench coat so, so much. And it's one of my favorite purchases I've made. And so, and for example, I kid you not, I've probably tried on over 20 trench coats. I
I
don't
believe
recommend
you.
that. I don't recommend that. And actually, I did a lot of trying on in Paris when we were here looking for an apartment, thinking like, okay, well, I'm going to find one. Where else am I going to find one in the fall? In Paris. Turns out I found it literally close to home. I went home and I tried on something that I saw on the rack, and I was like, I've been in the store hundreds of times. Why have I never even considered it? And so I think tension in terms of like how much I think of something really dictates purchasing for me. And then in terms of the fun wish list, and this is something that I'm trying to do for myself, every time I hit 1,000 new subscribers on Substack, I buy myself a fun gift. So when I hit my first 1,000, I bought myself a like a I don't like the name Butter Yellow, but it's
Mm.
called a Butter Yellow.
Rebrand it. Rebrand Butter Yellow.
Gosh,
Do you have a word
banana
for it?
yellow. No, it's
Okay.
probably even
Okay.
horrible. Just a light yellow. I bought a light yellow, kind of like colorless jacket.
Mm.
And is it the most practical color? No. Was there a black option? Yes. But what gave me joy was the color yellow. And so I bought it and I've worn it to dinner and I've worn it just around town to do nothing. And it's like, it just makes me happy. And it reminds me of like, oh, I bought this when I hit 1,000
Cool.
subscribers. And so I told myself that every time I hit that milestone, I'm going to buy myself something fun. And so I kind of go to the other list and I look, okay, well, what is giving me that like energetic feel of a purchase that doesn't feel like I need it?
Mhm.
I think that's the way I teeter and totter between the two. But yes, I don't buy a lot actually. And I think it's just because I try something on and then you're like, that's not what I had in mind. It just doesn't fit the way I thought it did. Or maybe I find something else, or fall in love with something else that's similar. So, so yeah,
I love the Solomon's idea. Going back, like with a trench. I don't know. I think that could
right,
be cool.
right. I, I, I'm warming up to the idea. I'm trying to decide. I need to go in and look at the colors. I know white is the classic. I don't think I would want black. But if there was a brown tone, that could work. That could potentially work. But stay tuned. We'll see.
I bought a pair this summer. They are hiking ones.
Yeah.
I actually wear them to hike. That's why I bought them. But I definitely have had a few moments where I'm like, ooh, these are very nice.
Yeah.
And they are reasonably like styled. You know what I mean? Like they
Mm-hmm.
have a form factor to them that I find interesting. And now sometimes I'm like, ooh, do I need a beige pair with like the little red tabs? I'm like,
Yes.
that could be cool actually. I don't know. Just
Yeah.
throwing it out there.
I've been working on what brands Parisians are wearing
Hmm.
article, and Solomon's are one of them. They are wearing those.
You know, I'm excited to read that one as well. So let's talk about body awareness. So this is kind of the concept of embodiment, slightly different from how we were talking about embodiment earlier, more about how things feel on our bodies. How do we feel when we wear specific textures, fits, or styles? Are there any things that you gravitate towards or away from because of how they make you feel on your body?
I I think in an essence, I gravitate towards things that bring ease into my life. For example, two contradicting. I mean, they're both dresses, but in my mind, they're contradicting. I love. I have this like chokehold. It has a chokehold on me. Smocked top dresses in the summer. One, I hope it's okay to say, I don't like wearing a bra in the summer. So I like the idea of just putting something on, and
Yeah.
so far I've been fortunate enough to be able that it works. And so one also, if it's I lived in stupid hot weather for so long that any additional layer was just too much. And so I still go back to that. And I think the ease of just throwing something on in the summer makes me feel put together, especially when like it's hot outside. You don't want to think, like you don't there's too your senses are overloaded. Um, and then on the flip side, it also is very much gives me ease. But last summer I bought a knit dress, and it's not what I would, it's not bodycon, you know, but it's definitely, it hits your curves on your body. And when I tried it on, when I remember I was trying something else on in the store, and the sales associate brought it to me, and I was like, "Ah, I'm not gonna like this." Like that's what I told myself, because I think I have hips, you know, things fit me differently compared to someone else who, you know, doesn't have wide hips like me. And so I was just like, I just know I'm not gonna like this. And she was like, I just try it on. And I was like, all right. I tried it on. I kid you not, I gasped. I was like, I was shocked at how beautiful I felt in that dress. And I think it, and I know it had to do with the weight of the cotton.
Mm.
It lays beautifully, and it doesn't like contract on you. I don't have a better word. There is a better word, but it still lets you like breathe and move while, yes, you can see your body shape. And I was like, wow, I have never felt this beautiful in a dress that was seemingly this tight. And it's not like a tight dress, but it's like a knit
Yeah.
dress, you know? And so I think ease has a lot to do with that in the summer, but also in the winter. I think, like, especially in the fall, winter time where you're often covered under an outer layer, I'm most likely in a jeans, t-shirt, and a sweater. And there's nothing necessarily groundbreaking about that unless you have this like really cool sweater that maybe has armholes and you can tie it a certain way, or you know, you can tie it at X, Y, and Z. And so I think I also gravitate towards pieces that give me ease and make me feel put together when you're doing something so repetitively. And I guess, unfortunately, fortunately for me, I really love the feel and fit of vintage Levi's. I own 501s and 505s. One, they're not cheap. You know, they take a long time to find a pair that fits you well. And in one way, I kind of love that you can't rely on the label. You know, I have two different pairs. They are technically different styles and they're different sizes. And, you know, I never once thought about that. And I know growing up, I was at one point in my life very hyper fixated on wearing a certain size or being or fitting into a size because a company told me that I need to be the certain size, you know? And so I like that, the illusion of that, just kind of like, oh, well, I'm just here to see which one I like based off fit, you know? And I don't know what voodoo they put in those jeans, but the fit is just fantastic. Or maybe it's has to be the denim that they used at that time. But yes, I think when there's like this perfect amount of like wear, it's worn in, but not like a sagginess that occurs, you know?
In the denim specifically.
In the denim specifically, yes.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned a little bit about, it sounded like you were alluding to like versatility of like wearing day in, day out. Is that a form of ease for you, is being able to wear something without like being sick of it? Or is it, is it not, is it more than the way it feels, but also how it like functions in your life?
Yes, I think it has to do with versatility as well. Um, when I think about the clothes that I wear the most, it is the clothes that fit more than one scenario, or silhouettes that fit specific scenarios. Like, I love a wide leg jean, but I love them even more with a pointy shoe.
Mm.
So when I'm wearing a wide leg jean, and I only own one specific type of wide leg jean, so I have not been able to test out a different scenario that I'm curious about, but I find I feel the best when there is a pointed shoe involved.
Yeah.
And when there isn't, I don't love it, even though I love that piece in a different scenario, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I find that so interesting and where our particular POV and our body and how we want our body to look. Going back to the film photography, one of the differences I would say between film as an art expression versus how we dress ourselves as a creative expression is the way that like film doesn't reflect our body image and how we feel about our bodies. And I think I'm not saying that you're talking about your body, but there is like a aesthetic preference that you might have, like for example with the pointed toe shoe for how you would want to wear a wide leg.
Mm,
And this is going to be so good if I can land it. I guess like to me the difference with film is that it's less personal, and I think with clothing it can be a lot harder to nail because it's really about how we view ourselves and like how we want to be perceived and all that stuff, and it seems very different from like a photograph is part of us, but it's not related to how we feel about our body or how we want our aesthetic to be. And just going back to the wide leg pant example, I personally like how wide leg pants look with any type of shoe on me. And
yeah.
so I think it's really interesting the way that we can have the same type of item and have different aesthetic preferences for it on us versus on someone else. And on me, for example, I love how like a straight leg pant looks on other people with a sneaker, but I hate that combination on me. And a wide leg pant instead is my favorite way to wear a sneaker because you can't see it
Yeah.
because the
No,
sneaker disappears. So I just think that like again, there's that tension between what we like on ourselves versus other people, and how do we make sense of that?
100%. And it actually kind of reminds me of something Heather Hurst said a long time ago in one of her videos, is like, especially around jeans. I remember she was trying on a ton of different jeans, and on her, we all, like everyone, I think in the comments was like, oh, like what straight leg jean is that? And she's like, it's actually a boot cut. It's like to you, it's perceived as something else, but on my body, it gives off the illusion that it's something when it's really something else. And it's like really
Yeah.
this idea of like, we really need to lean in into what we feel good in versus like, oh, I need to buy this because it's a straight leg, or I need to wear this because it's this and that. So yeah, I 100% agree of like, I also think we're also much more critical of ourselves versus like uh, someone else looking at us, right? Like I'm sure if I showed up to your house in a wide leg jean and sneakers, you'd be like, "That's fabulous," but I'd be like, "I'm so sorry, I had to run out the door, and this is all I had," you know? Because
Well,
I'm
and
sure
I
I've said that before.
And I think that's super fair too, right? Like we're looking for, especially as we move up the fashion hierarchy, maybe a wide leg pant with a sneaker for you is like just having clothes, right? And
Yeah,
maybe for me, a wide leg jean with sneakers is actually like higher up on my hierarchy. And that doesn't
yeah,
make either one of them wrong. It's just like they mean different things to us, and I think that's kind of amazing, actually.
yeah. No, that's beautifully said, and I think they should be,
Yeah.
because then that means we are all comparing ourselves against our own standard and not to somebody else's standard.
Yeah, right. Because we will fail if we're going with
Yes,
someone else's standard.
1000%.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. What advice would you give to someone trying to build a wardrobe that feels intuitive and authentic to them?
I think generally you should start with figuring out what you like and don't like. And one great way to do that, actually, I have two ways, is to take a picture every day and also write down what you like or don't like about something. And I don't mean necessarily like how it, like, talk about how it feels, not necessarily about like how it makes maybe a certain part of your body look. You can totally write that down, but you don't want to be tearing yourself down during these moments. Like you're trying to build yourself up. Like you want to approach it in a very curious manner. Like, what could I learn about this outfit that I wore today? Like, what do I like? What do I not like? In terms of, I think one of the things we often want to do is we want to immediately go out and buy things. And I would say, don't do that. And instead, try to sit with your closet and work within that tension. And one way that I actually did this many, many years ago is I would hang up all my hangers the opposite direction. So if you like take it off the hanger this way, you would have to like unhook it the other way. And after an X amount of time, maybe a month or 2 months, anything that was not turned around meant that I hadn't reached for it. I think now you can use something like index, but I'm an insanely visual person. So looking at my closet, that was really helpful. And then take it off the hanger, put it in a black bag, leave it in the corner of your closet for a month, 2 months, and see, did you think about any of the pieces that you put away? If you didn't think about it, do not open the bag. Take it to get donated or give it to a friend to sell it for you. Whatever you do, don't look inside. And I think that helps you figure out, like, one, if you have a hard time letting go of things, that's a great way to let go. I can't even tell you one thing that was in any of those bags that I donated years ago. Not one thing. So I think that to me tells me that thing that I put in there, I didn't need. It was just taking up space in my closet. And once you've created that enough space in your closet, but also in your brain, then you can start rendezvousing with new pieces
Yeah.
out in the world.
Such good advice and hard advice to listen to.
It's tough.
Respectfully. No, but you're so right. And it is important to sit with the clothes that we already have and learn from them before we spend all of our money and time elsewhere. Thank you so much, Ofelia. This was lovely. Where can listeners find you?
You can find me on all the above on Substack. I'm also on Instagram, TikTok, and I'm sometimes pinning things on Pinterest.
Okay.
I believe my username for all of them is just OFERODRAG. But yeah,
Cool
I
handle.
hope you come hang out.
Awesome. I will make sure to link to all those in the show notes. Thank you again for joining me. This was a delight.
Thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun.
Intuitive Style is produced, edited, and hosted by me, Maureen Walton. Our theme music is by Tim Reed and Jacob Walton. In case you missed it, Intuitive Style, the podcast, is an offshoot of Intuitive Style, the newsletter. Head on over to Substack, search Intuitive Style to read the newsletter, which covers reflections on what's happening in personal style world, guest features, and the encouragement that there's no right way to get dressed. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Share this episode with someone you think might enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe as new episodes drop weekly on Fridays. Thanks. See you next week.